Boom.
How's it going?
Like butter.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Congrats, man.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah.
That is not a race I was ever able to get out to, but I can recall years ago, just looking at the race profile online, and wishing I was a bit more of a climber, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So, for those who will be listening to this later and maybe aren't familiar, can you give a brief overview of Shenandoah?
Yeah. I mean, it's been going. This was the 22nd annual, so it's been going on for a long time. It's probably one of the original 100-mile mountain bike races. I don't know. I was 3 years old when the first one happened, so
I would confirm your comment. So I can do that. I've got the age to do that. No question. It is of legendary status. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, and a ton of climbing, 12,000 feet of climbing in 100 miles mountain bike. And the trails are awesome. There's 6 main climbs in the race. One of them is almost 17 miles long. It's called the Death Climb, and that's the second to last climb, so it comes late in the race too. People are fatigued by that point. And there's also, I mean, it's a mountain bike race. Like, the downhills are fairly technical, but there's actually quite a bit of flat gravel and road section too. 2 of the 6 climbs are single track, pretty technical single track. In fact, a lot of people have to walk, and then the rest of the climbs are gravel. So it's an interesting mix of terrain.
How is the opening for that race? Is it a situation where I think I remember you saying that in a lot of these races people go out too hot anyway, but is it a case where is there a bottleneck where you kind of have to get there first, or how's the opening?
So there's an opening road section that's maybe, I don't know, less than 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, something like that. And then you get on to the first gravel climb, and that's probably 30 minutes of climbing. And there will, if you're too far back, there will be a bottleneck getting into the single track. So you don't want to be too far back going into that one. This year, they started us in waves of 10 due to COVID, but they only had 15 seconds separating us. So I think that the second group quickly caught us, and there was a lead group of 20. And the race promoter did a good job of making sure that the people that were likely to get a good time were in those first 2 groups. So it was all heavy hitters in that first, in that lead group of 20. But yeah, I thought that maybe because they didn't start everyone at the same time, maybe this year would be a little bit more chill at the start. It wasn't the case at all. I mean, it was hard from the gun, just like it always is. And it was too hard. Like, I kept looking down and seeing my power over my threshold. I kept seeing my heart rate going to places where I didn't want it to go. And it happens every year, but what I purposely did this year was I went into the climb second wheel, and I actually purposefully drifted back in the group, and then I entered the single track at the top last wheel, and I actually lost about a minute to the guy who led the climb, but I did that purposely because I wanted to save energy. And by the time we got to the bottom of the downhill and there was a flat road section after that, I caught back onto that front group, so it wasn't an issue. And I think doing that, I saved a little bit more energy for the rest of the race.
So is that kind of self-control something that, because I think it's reasonable to say you're like a well thought out guy. Like, have you always sort of had that, or have you sort of learned that like via experience where like the pain was as much of a lesson giver as opposed to the metrics or the facts.
Yeah, it's 100% an experience thing. Believe me, I've gone out way too hard, way more times than I've been calm and collected and conservative. So yeah, no, it's definitely an experience thing. And you just learn that, and part of my job is looking at power files, right, from races, and
Absolutely, yeah.
every single power file that I look at from a race that's this distance, the power drops steadily throughout the race. The first hour is the best, and then it drops, and that's not optimal pacing. I mean, I have a video about pacing where I researched optimal pacing strategies. It depends on the event, obviously, but generally the optimal pacing strategy for an event like this is to have even pacing throughout the event, not lose power throughout the event. So it takes a lot of self-control because going at that pace at the beginning, I mean, it didn't feel like I was going, like I had a lot more to give, and I was watching people ride away from me. So it kind of takes, you got to be confident that you're doing the right thing in the moment, because it doesn't feel like the right thing.
Well, yeah, watching people ride away from you never feels very good. That's
Right.
that's
But
for sure.
This is a certain situation where you're watching people ride away from you, and you could stay on their wheel easily. You could easily stay on their wheel, but you're purposefully not doing that because you know that there's a lot more miles in this race to come. And I coach a lot of athletes that do these kinds of races, and like I said, it's a universal problem with ultra endurance racing that people go out too hard.
So, and then in your own experience, as well as like when you're coaching, like, did you have an individual race where like the light bulb really went on, where like you kept being kind of conservative and then checked the power fire later, maybe won the thing, who knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, it was sort of that aha moment, or was it a bit more gradual than that?
I don't think it was an aha moment as much as it was, learning a little bit at every single race. Every single race you do, you learn something, especially if the race doesn't go well. Those are kind of the best learning opportunities. And I've been racing enough to know that riding at your 1 hour max power for the first hour of a race that's supposed to last 7 hours is not sustainable.
It's probably suboptimal.
Even if it feels like you could do that all day, it's not going to happen. So sometimes, honestly, in some races you don't have a choice, because sticking with that front group is more valuable than proper pacing, depending on the race. This course, I mean, I've done Shenandoah 107 times, so I know that there's a flat gravel section right after this climb and descent that it's easy to catch back up to that front group. There's some races where that's not the case, and you just kind of have to do what the front group does.
Well, and like, I'm sure a little bit later we'll talk about various types of races, but there's always that calculus around, okay, if I stick and stay in the draft, right, I gain X, and if I drop off,
right,
that's sort of the abacus has to be sorted out differently, right? Just in terms of what it would mean to actually get the kind of result you want. So you stuck conservatively. I love race reports, so if you don't mind, I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper.
I'll probably. A lot of people have asked for a video about the race, so I don't have any footage from the race, but I do have some pictures, so I might make a video about it.
Well, I don't want to be a spoiler for that,
No,
so
we
can move on if you want.
we can definitely talk about it. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just obviously want to respect what you have going on, right, with your channel. So, so you obviously kind of played it. Conservative is not really even the right word, probably. Intelligently, maybe. And you get to the bottom of the first downhill. Like, how did the race go for you from there? Because sometimes you have a magic race where you feel great the whole time, but that's obviously a rarity. And you intentionally kind of put yourself in the back, not off the back, but in the back. So,
Right.
Take us through it. Like, how did it go from there?
Yeah. So, I'm quite a ways back. So I think the first couple people that were at the front of that group were downhilling faster than the back of the group. So by the time we got to the bottom, there was a gap between the top five and then the next group back. So we kind of worked as a group for maybe 5 minutes to catch back to that group, and then we were back to, we were all together again, which is usually how things play out at this race. The next climb number 2, is probably, well, it's not the longest climb of the race. That's the death climb. It's probably the hardest climb of the race because it's single track and it's extremely steep. And in fact, most people consider it a hike-a-bike. And even the front runners have to hike a little bit of it if it's poor conditions. Luckily, it was dry this year, but
is it very technical?
Yeah, if it wasn't so steep, it wouldn't be a problem. But I think the main problem is that it's so steep. So the technical bits are amplified, right? Just because you're going at VO2 max pace just to keep the bike upright.
Yeah, like that moment you tick a route, right, and there's nowhere to downshift.
Mm-hmm.
That route can be pretty small, but it feels like a lot to kind of roll over it. So
right,
so it makes complete sense.
So I knew that there is no conserving energy on this climb. You just have to, even to make it up without bobbling or walking, you have to go basically as hard as you can. And that was where I set my best 20-minute power of the race. I did like 338 watts for 20 minutes going up that,
nice.
Which is not far off my threshold. And that was honestly, that pace was just to keep the bike upright. Like if I had gone any slower than that, I would have been walking.
Gotcha.
So that I got to the top of that climb, second wheel, and then me and the guy who got to the top of the climb first, just ahead of me was Matt Acker.
Okay.
I don't know if you know who he is, but he's
I do, yeah.
Yeah, ultra endurance racer.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. So we put a little bit of time on everybody in the group on the descent off of that climb, and we found ourselves at the bottom of that descent on a road section with probably 45 seconds over the chasing group. So we kind of tried to see if we could create a gap, but the group behind was probably 6, so it was like 6 versus 2. So before the third climb, they had caught us, and we were back to 8 guys. And then on that third climb is when I dropped almost everyone in the group except for Will Lovner, who I'd never raced before, and I didn't know who he was. He's a pretty young guy. I think he's 23, but small guy, small and skinny and great climber, was having no problem keeping up on any of the climbs. And we rode together for most of the day until we rode up the death climb together. I was a little bit stronger than him on the flats and the downhills. And I noticed, so when we were going up the death climb, I thought that it would be unlikely that I could drop him on the actual climb. But coming off the death climb is the longest descent of the race. It's like a 20-minute descent, and it's probably the most technical one too. So I was like, that's where I can create a gap. And sure enough, I got a gap on him on that descent, and then it was just 10 miles to the finish, and I had to hold pace after that. So the race actually came down to a downhill, which is unusual for this.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, it sounds like maybe, not to put you on the spot of bragging about yourself, but like you feel pretty comfortable your technical skills were gonna kind of carry the day, or? So,
I mean, I'm no like insane technical rider. I think there were a couple things that were helping me out. One, I've done the race 7 times, so I know the descents in the race. That was Will's first time doing the race, so he didn't know the descents.
Gotcha.
And I also ran a dropper post for the race. Will didn't have a dropper post. I mean, I think
I should ask, Aerobars?
Yeah, 100% Aerobars on this course. There are quite a few flat sections.
Okay.
Like the lead into the death climb is like probably 6 or 7 miles of flat gravel. I would say, now it's hard to say this because in an actual race scenario, there's a lot of tactics going on, and you're kind of working with a group. But I would say that if you were to do this race solo and just trying to get the best time that you could, if you had Aerobars on this course, it would probably be 10 to 15 minutes faster. Just because there's that much flat gravel and road.
You just, and I'm poking fun, but you just have to try to convince Jeff Kabush of that. Is that?
I don't know if I'll ever. Yeah, whatever. He's.
I'm just having fun with it. I'm not trying to create an awkward moment.
Yeah,
I just.
He's entitled to his opinion. I don't care.
Well, sure. Well, like I think your stance, and again, not to. I've been trying not to write you a Hallmark card because my wife's called me out on saying that too many times. But like you do, I think you do a very good job of explaining the science, right? Mm-hmm. And like the science behind being more aerodynamic is pretty hard to argue. I mean,
yeah, and Jeff Kabush isn't even arguing that it's not an advantage. I mean, he fully well knows it's an advantage.
True.
I think he claims that it's a safety thing, but I think what he's more concerned about is that it's going against like cycling culture and cycling norms. It's like the stereotype that the guy who shows up to the group ride with Aerobars is the guy who doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, and like not to dive too deep into this, what I find funny about that is like I would be the cliche guy that was the old school early person doing gravel events. Mm-hmm. And so like I did the first Trans Iowa. I didn't do the first Kanza, I did the second one. And so on from there. And close to popping some top 10s on a single speed, different era, right? But we also had like guys like Cameron Chambers, who was the 24-hour national championship, did that race. So there's sort of this strange rewriting of history that sometimes takes place. And like it's just this, there was the same discussion previously. Are pros going to ruin the event? Well, Cameron didn't ruin it. So why would someone like yourself ruin it, right? Why would the EF guys ruin it? And so being the guy that's supposedly the old school guy that would have a problem, I don't see how anybody would have a problem. I just find the whole thing like sort of gossipy ridiculousness. So maybe that's just me. Well, this is kind of funny.
Right. And one thing I find cool about kind of where gravel is at in the US right now, and you know, races like Kanza, is that it's kind of like anything goes out there. Any bike setup goes, you know. I mean, you can't have like an e-bike, but other than that, it's like, you know, whatever you run, and I mean, if people are trying to make that, you know, that 200 miles easier on themselves, I don't see a problem with that, you know. So it's
Well,
not.
and there's different ways to make it easier on yourself based on your goals, right?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, your goal is going to be to get from A to B as fast as possible,
Right.
right? Fair?
Mhm. Yep.
And there are people that are out there that is not their goal.
Mhm.
And so they're going to try to make themselves as comfortable as possible. And that takes on so many shapes and forms. Like, you could do an entire video on the bikes of Kanza. Not
Right.
you, but someone could. I suppose you could. Or Backward Hacks Dylan could do it. But, and I've seen, the other thing is, sometimes people are just bad bike handlers.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen the person take the turn on the loose gravel in their Aerobars, and it was a bad move.
Right.
And they just about took some people out. But I've also seen the person take it way too hot, and they would fit into sort of the textbook, like, here's how, you know, last year people think you ought to be riding. So pick your poison, I suppose, in terms of what the move is.
Right.
Yeah, I just think,
Yep.
I like your attitude about it, and I think it's sometimes there's a misrepresentation of the way it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bit silly. So sorry, now I've gotten on a soapbox a little bit, but so let me segue off of that. When we were talking last time and my audio went out, so I couldn't hear you, I had just asked you like how you saw your calendar coming up. And then that's when I could tell you were giving a quality answer, right? And putting some effort into it. And I couldn't hear a word you were saying. And later my wife was like, it really sucks you didn't hear that because you would have loved it. So I'll apologize in advance for making you repeat yourself, but what do you have planned like coming up? Because like this year, you won sugarcane, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a sprint, so gravel.
Right.
And now you just won Shenandoah, so
Yeah.
it kind of shows you can do it all. So how are you thinking about things coming up?
Well, I don't know if do it all is the right.
Wow,
I don't know if do it all.
that's fair
I'm
enough
really,
because you're not
really
at the tour
good
right
in
now.
I'm really good in races that are like 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
If you threw me into a short track race, you'd be like, no, that kid cannot do it all.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'll rephrase my compliment later in some other way. But how are you thinking about things coming up?
Right. Yeah. So before the pandemic hit, I signed up for the Triple Crown Belgian Waffle Ride series. So, you know, there's the San Diego one, there's one in Cedar City, Utah, and one in Asheville. That they all got postponed. The Asheville one is now in 2021, but the Cedar City, Utah one is looking like it's going to happen in October. So if it's happening, I'll be there. I may drive across the country and make it kind of like a road trip thing. But yeah.
Well, if you come across 80, I don't exactly know how that would best work for you, but we'll help you out with the pit stop. And the other thing I would mention is Jay Thomas, who runs Factor Bikes Champion Systems, is doing that race as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be good to get you guys connected just to share resources and
yeah.
if nothing else, just a good guy to know in the industry.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But as far as kind of beyond that, I think that I've really like 2020. I kind of wanted to break into the gravel scene. I mean, I've done Kanza once. You know, I've done some other gravel races as well. But I'd signed up for all the big gravel races, like the Belgian Waffle Ride series, Big Sugar, SBT, Gravel Worlds. I was signed up for all of them. So I really kind of wanted to make a name as a gravel racer, because for the past, 5 years, I've been focused on ultra endurance mountain bike racing, which I love, but I think that for whatever reason, gravel is gaining so much popularity now. And I think that if you're an ultra endurance racer, that's kind of where you need to be. And it's really cool too, because, gravel racing could just be an off-road version of road racing, and we could have gravel crits and, gravel races that were 50 miles long. But gravel has really embraced long distance. I mean, the most popular gravel race in the world is 200 miles long. A lot of them are 100 plus, 150. And that's the kind of race that I excel at. When you're in the saddle for 7+ hours. So I think, if the schedule is back to normal next year, who knows? That's what I'm going to be shooting for.
And is there, so sort of within that world, are there, like, have you done the analysis to know, like, are there particular lengths even within that, like, 200 versus 150 that you really feel like suit you, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I've only done 200 miles, just period. I've only done 200 miles, period, one time in my life, and that was Dirty Kanza in 2018. And it absolutely destroyed me. I have a video about it, but it was not a pretty race for me. So I thought that sugarcane was going to be 200 until they cut it to 150. And I was really looking forward to having another shot at that distance gravel race. And I think that I didn't have a low period that whole day at sugarcane. And I think that if the race had been another 50 miles, the outcome might have been different. I might have been more fatigued, and, Ted King or Jeremiah Bishop may have had more legs, but I think I would have at least crossed the finish line feeling like I had a good race that day if it had been another 50 miles. That being said, for the past couple of years, I've been focusing on 100-mile mountain bike racing, and generally the amount of time that it takes to finish one of those for the top contenders is, anywhere from high 6 hours to low 8 hours. Generally in the 7-hour period is probably the average. And for gravel, if it's a fast gravel race, that could be a 150-mile race. So, I've done well. Like, sugarcane was 150 miles. I've also done well at the Croatan 150. So, and a lot of these gravel races are in that 140 to 160 mile range, which I think is like the perfect range for me.
Have you ever thought about, and I know you're just getting into it, but in general, but have you thought about going even longer, like a DKXL type of situation?
Yeah. It's funny. I said that I've never ridden 200 miles before, but I take that back. I rode 230 miles or something this February at the 24 Hours of Old Pueblo.
Okay, sure.
And I've thought about doing more 24-hour mountain bike racing, and that was the first 24-hour mountain bike race I'd ever done. So yeah, I have thought about going longer. It would probably, I don't know if it would be DKXL. It might, but it would probably be.
I only thought of that option because that's what I did last year. So
yeah,
there's plenty of other options.
How was that compared? Because you've done both. How
Right.
was that compared to the regular 200?
Well, so here's where it's sort of like when you commented that you knew the Shenandoah course really well because you've done it so many times. DKXL is sort of like a greatest hits of all the various DK courses over the years. Mm-hmm. And so, it was just, you can almost overthink it. Like it was just a lot more of the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? The difference was like when I assume the course went through Red Bud Road when you did it before. Like,
I'm really unfamiliar with the
okay,
roads
yeah,
in
fair enough. So
Shenandoah.
it's a Jeep road that, in its proper sense, where if you think you are going to just bang through it like you would a normal flat section of gravel, there's already a lot of problems with mechanicals, right, at Kanza.
Yeah.
And you might as well just be handing your bike over to somebody to let them throw it in the ditch if you take Red Bud Road at top
Right.
speed, right? And
Right.
so, it's really just it's a matter of knowing the course, just like any other course, in that sense. So for me, it was a little bit different as well, and it's kind of hard to compare because every time I've done the 200, I did it on a single speed.
Mm-hmm.
Someone thinks you're handsome, by the way.
Oh,
And
thank you.
then this was the first time I'd actually done a gravel race with gears. So I kind of went from like kind of working on this startup EliteForm, right? And then getting back into racing. And I've been made fun of by a lot of people for this, but I went with DKXL as my way to get back in.
Nice.
Because I just thought, well,
Nice. Yeah.
as big a challenge as you can get. And then I had been out of the game long enough. You might find this kind of funny. So I had no idea that now there was a sign up process where you actually provided like a resume, right,
Mm-hmm.
of your races. And so, like, for you, that's going to be a nice list, right? Well, for me, I actually had nothing for 7 years. And so, but I remember the organizer remembered me. And so I literally, my resume was just writing him an email inside that sign up form. So it was like as simple as, hey, Jim, so I'm getting back into it. I want to do it here. I want to do it in your race. The only difference is like I won't be on a single speed anymore.
Yeah.
And I just kind of hope that OG Gravel Cred, I think is what Corey Godfrey, who runs Gravel Worlds, that was his phrase. He's like, man, you'll get in on OG Gravel Cred.
Mm-hmm.
And they let me in, right?
Yeah.
So
That's
lined
awesome.
up behind Kirchhoff and those guys and hung out for a while, and then just ripped my sidewall apart, and it became, well, now I'm just going to finish it,
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, so that's kind of a long-winded answer, but it really is, tactically, like as well as you think things through, tactically it's just different because sleep deprivation is involved,
Right.
right? It's not just 60 miles between stations. So there's the math of this convenience store closes at midnight. If I make it there, I've got to go 120 miles before I'm going to see another one that's open.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you just have to make sure that you've stocked accordingly, right? So to me, that was the biggest difference, is sort of the execution, but the writing's all the same.
Right.
So Aerobar is 100% required.
Yeah. I can imagine.
So actually, I didn't run them though. I just did the, Euro style, just lean it all the way down into the drops and shift with your pinkies
Right.
and that whole move. But can we segue back over to just kind of some of your video efforts a little bit?
Yeah. Let's do it.
So I'm asking this one, and just hand raised. This is almost like a bit of a work question that I'm wrapping into this.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think about, so like you've talked about AMP as on a video, right? And the science behind that. And you've talked about Whoop as a product and HRV and the science behind that. How do
Right.
you feel about like addressing products versus like the science behind the products in a video like that? And maybe I should tell you why I asked before you answer. One of the challenges we had getting going is So we wanted our product to be put through a validation study, right? But if you ask someone to do it, you're already sort of creating this weird scenario because you've asked.
Right.
But you really need someone to validate the product, right?
Right. Yep, definitely.
So
Um,
we ended up just letting it ride. And then it just ended up happening,
right.
which was, in the end, nice, but a little nerve-wracking, too, at times when someone says, so, yeah, so do you have some validations studies you can send me? Well, no,
Right.
because no one's done one yet. Well, why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I rarely do videos on specific products, but every once in a while I will. I think one of the AMP just, I mean, they don't have a lot of science, and the science that they do have was funded by AMP, and you know, honestly, they kind of manipulate the results to make it look like the science was saying that AMP was great, when in fact I looked at the same study and I was like, this is telling me that AMP didn't do anything. So I don't know. I think the conclusion of that video was that there is no conclusion right now. And some people get upset with me when I do that, but I do that when the science is inconclusive. So,
Which is
I
what a
think,
good scientist would do.
right,
So that's kind
yeah,
of the point, right?
yeah, right, exactly. I think one of the most popular video that I've done that was about a product was actually about oval chain rings. And there actually is
Oh, that's right. I forgot
there,
about that one.
there actually is a bit of science on oval chain rings. Most of it is funded by oval chain ring companies. So it seems that you know, the rotor Q ring and the absolute black, which basically copied the shape of rotor, those are not oval enough to do anything. They're not going to hurt you, but they're not oval enough to do something. I think some of the more extreme ovals, like the asymmetric, it's debatable. It's a little bit more debatable whether it does something or not. I would still say the conclusion is that we don't have enough data right now. But there were some studies that you know, made me think that if there was any oval chaining that would work, it would be a more extreme oval. And there was even one that did, I think, a computer modeling of what the optimal oval would be, and it was so extreme that it wouldn't actually work on an actual bicycle. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as doing, you know, doing videos about products and looking at the science on products, I try to. I've been approached by a lot of companies to do videos about their products, and I'm not even really a review channel, so usually I say that I don't want to. But I, if it's a company that, or if it's a product that has science behind it, like I try to be as objective as possible. And for example, with the Whoop video, you know, Whoop didn't give me the Whoop strap. I bought the Whoop strap with my own money, and did the video on that. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of like GCN's a perfect example. Like half their videos are advertisements for some
Right.
product.
Right. I think we
And
talked about that briefly last time we chatted. Yeah.
and I don't want to go down that road. And if I'm doing some sort of product review or talking about a product, I want it to be genuine. I mean, even if it's a product that a sponsor gave me, you know,
Sure.
I want to be genuine about what I think about the product. So, and then as far as looking at the science, same thing. You know, I'm going to say what the science has to say. Is it conclusive? Is it not conclusive? So.
Yeah, and that's I was just kind of interested in that just because you're sort of on a side of it that I'm not on, right, in terms of what we do. And the HRV piece was interesting because we work with a lot of teams like Power 5 universities, et cetera. And so they'll have these different systems that they use. And so from an HRV perspective, like schools don't use Whoop because Whoop's just not really pushing HRV in that direction, sort of into that market. So we're familiar with like Omega Wave, or just some other companies. Fatigue Science is another one.
Right.
And there's the fundamentals of the science.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the difference of what a company is doing with that science. And so it's always sort of fascinating. I think, to your credit, you're always discussing science first.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it has kind of a downstream effect, which for me is the only way to do it. And then as a business owner, I think it's the only way I would want someone to do it. Not that I'm asking you to do a video on us. Don't get me wrong. There's no long lead into that. But it's just fascinating to hear your opinion from the other side, if that makes sense. So the recent video you did was on myths. And I was just kind of curious, like you list off 5 of them. Did you believe in any of those, like for a while, becoming a cyclist, or?
Yeah. So let's see. The myths were. Cycling myths video. Okay. Okay, the first one, cramping with electrolytes. Yeah, I mean, I totally thought that was, I thought that not getting enough electrolytes was the cause of cramping.
Hand raised,
now,
me too.
So
me
this
too.
is the important piece here, is that I'm not saying that you shouldn't have electrolytes, particularly sodium, because that is important for hydration. If you just drink straight water, that's not optimal for hydration. But it doesn't appear that that is the cause of cramping, at least from the science. And there's most of the most current like meta-analyses on the topic are all pointing to this altered neuromuscular control theory, not the electrolyte theory. I think that the stretching one, I get a lot of hate. I made a whole video on stretching. And I get a lot of hate on that video. Like I'll get comments like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Stretching saved my dog.
I mean, I like dogs, but that doesn't mean it was the stretching, right?
So I'm not even anti-stretching, and I wasn't anti-stretching going into that video. Like when I did the research on that video, I didn't know what the answer would be. I went in just saying like, what is the science going to have to say? And then I went through some studies, and I was like, wow, these all keep coming to the same conclusion. It's kind of crazy, because I've been told that I need a stretch since I was, in elementary school.
Sure.
In gym.
Oh, it's pervasive. It's pervasive. Absolutely.
Right. So, I mean, one thing's for sure, if you're stretching before your ride, that is detrimental to your performance. If you stretch after your ride or stretch at night because it relaxes you, I mean, it's probably not helping you, but it's also not hurting you. I don't see a problem with that. Just don't stretch right before you ride if you're trying to get a PR that day, or you got a race or something.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the challenges with talking about myths, I think, is like when you're talking about even knowledge that's handed down or myths, like the details and like around what someone is saying is the benefit becomes pretty important, right? So talking about stretching as a performance benefit versus like anything post-ride, right? Then you can get into an issue of like maybe even it doesn't help recover, but it creates a placebo effect for other reasons, right? And so if someone thinks they're getting a benefit, like I think you even put it this way in the video, I can't quite remember, but yeah, if it's working for you, keep stretching.
Right.
That kind of thing. Just don't think it's going to help you to, stretch for 20 minutes before a race.
Yeah, and I've talked a lot about the placebo effect in certain videos, and I mean, I think there's something to be said that if you think something is working, that's probably more effective than whatever it is that you think is actually working, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, I've also gotten comments from people saying, you know, I had a bad back, or, you know, I have tight hamstrings or something, and stretching alleviates the pain. And that's great. I think, you know, I'm not a physical therapist, and I think there's probably certain injuries where stretching is the best medicine. But I mean, even the research on whether or not stretching prevents injury does not look promising for stretching.
I don't usually read off people's like questions that they type in, but somebody did just ask, and now it's scrolled. What about greater mobility for reaching a more aerodynamic position? And I don't know if they were having fun with it because of the Aerobar thing or not, but
Right.
you want to address that at all?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, I think that there's definitely a case to be made there. There was actually one study that I found on this very topic, and I think it's probably the only study done on it. And they came to the conclusion that you're already flexible enough, at least the set of subjects they had were already flexible enough to get into the aero position. It wasn't a matter of hamstring flexibility getting into the aero position. Now, everybody's different with their flexibility. Some people are not flexible at all, and you know, getting into the aero position is painful. So in that case, you probably need to work on it.
Well, and like that's where having a nuanced conversation kind of comes into play. Like
Mm-hmm.
the value of stretching in that case still isn't the same thing as the conversation about what happens if you stretch 20 minutes before you race, right?
Right.
Like this idea that you're gaining mobility, you know, through efforts that you do and stretching like over a 6 week period every evening,
Mm-hmm.
and that potentially leading to better mobility on the bike is
Right.
different, right, than the myth of, stand at the side of your desk and pull your heel up in the air right before you hop on the bike to race.
I think the biggest takeaway from that bit of that video is do not stand on the starting line of a race and do quad stretches. Don't do that. That's not helping you.
Fair enough. I can't remember if Backward Hat Dylan had anything to say about that, but yeah, absolutely. Um, I did see in the comments a couple people asked, and we're kind of running low on time, um, if you'd be open to doing a video, and I actually jotted this down. Like, so I've just started cycling. How do I start training?
Mm.
Is that anything that's sort of on your radar to, again, not to be a spoiler for anything you're working on, but is that anything that's on your radar to do? Because I just thought it was an interesting comment, right?
Right.
Because we might geek out, like, and we talked on the phone before ever having you on, right? Having, both been cyclists for quite a while, about what we might do in training. But if someone comes to your channel and they're literally at square one, how would you have that conversation?
Right. Yeah. So I think probably 2 months ago at this point, I did a video for beginner cyclists. I forget what the title was, like how to beginner cycling mistakes, maybe something like that. But it was targeted towards beginner cyclists. And I think that the biggest criticism of that video was that it was not beginner enough. You know,
Oh, that's
uh,
interesting.
I had a couple people who seemed like, I mean, they were generally, genuinely beginners. Like they were like, I just bought my bike from the bike shop and I have no idea what you're talking about at all. So I was like, oh man, I need it. The difficult thing with going even more beginner than that would be, I don't know if it would actually reach people on my channel, because most of my base are fairly serious cyclists, and when they see a video like that, they don't watch it. And if the video doesn't get watched, YouTube won't recommend it. The first people that YouTube recommends a video to are the people that normally watch your videos. And
Right.
if they don't watch the video, then YouTube is like, well, this isn't a good video. We're not going to recommend it to people. So, I mean, I would certainly be open to doing, and maybe a part 2 to that video. Like, you just got your bike. What do you do now? I don't know how popular it would be, just because of kind of the niche that I've put myself in. I think GCN could probably get away with doing a video like that, but
That's a really good point.
like
That's a
I
really
kind
good
of
point.
niched myself at this point.
Well, yeah, the pandemic has added an interesting level to that because, so many various businesses are struggling, but you can't find half of what you need at a bike shop now, right?
Yeah, well, cycling industry is not struggling at all, so it's very interesting.
No. Yeah, the issue with the cycling industry may come up like a year or two from now when all those people who did finally decide to go get a bike and get out aren't going to turn around like we might do. And, the correct number of bikes is N+1 and it's time to upgrade. And, and like your sponsors will want you on their latest and greatest. So the downstream effect of this will be interesting to look at like a little while down the road. And then the YouTube side is something else I didn't think about. Like EliteForm as a company, our stuff, like we're looking to sort of branch into providing content because now we have so much historically that we've done with schools. And frankly, I do watch and see how you do things, but it's been interesting. Like there is definitely that domino effect of once you get going and YouTube recognizes your videos and starts pushing them, that's kind of an area you have to stay in.
Yeah, so when I first started doing YouTube, I did a lot of research about how to make a successful YouTube channel. All of it was like I did all my research on YouTube. I watched YouTubers talk about how to do YouTube.
That's what I've been doing.
Right? So, and they all say the same thing. If you make a channel where one video you're talking about how to bake a cake, and then the next video you're talking about how to change the oil in your car, you're never going to get anywhere. Because the people that liked your video about baking a cake are not going to care about car videos, and then your audience is never going to grow. It's if you want growth on YouTube, you kind of have to find a niche and make videos that are related to that niche, especially if you're starting small. I think some of the really big YouTubers can kind of do whatever they want, and they already have such a massive audience that it doesn't matter. But
once you have a platform, it's a heck of a lot different than establishing the platform in the first place. So
right. So yeah, they all said the same thing. You got to find your niche, and then you got to cater to that niche. And they some of the videos I watched made a really good point that some people start a YouTube channel in a certain niche, and then they're just not that passionate about that niche, and then they burn out easily. I mean, I could easily see that happening. Luckily, cycling is something that I've been passionate about for since I was like 13. So I don't see that being.
You're not too worried about burnout?
Hopefully not. Yeah.
Well, sure. Yeah. Well, hey, we're going to get kicked off here shortly. So happy to wrap up. Is there anything else you wanted to chat about or talk about before we end?
No, I think this was a good convo. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm just glad the audio held out. No, thanks for coming on again after that snafu. I emailed you afterwards. That drove me insane. I was like, because, having not talked a lot, one of the things that ends up happening is people try to find a rhythm in having a conversation.
Yep.
And I felt like we had just gotten into a rhythm, right?
Yep.
And got into a flow, and then boom, I can't hear what you're saying. So thanks again for coming on. Good luck with whatever you have coming up next. I know somebody asked if you were going to run Aerobars at DD. Is that a race you have coming up?
Yeah, DD is, I think that probably stands for Dirt Diggler, which is a local gravel race that's happening tomorrow. The race is so up and down with so little flat sections that I probably won't. I don't think there's actually enough time to use them to make it worth it. And there's going to be a lot of climbing, so it's going to be beneficial to save a little bit of weight for that race.
Gotcha. Well, that's why you assess each race, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Aerobars
are definitely not best for every course by any means. Especially if we're talking about mountain biking.
Yeah, exactly. That's the value of nuance, for sure. So, well, hey, if that Belgian waffle ride race ends up happening and you come through, let me know. And then we can email about that, obviously offline, I suppose. But thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And then maybe we can catch up again sometime in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. I appreciate it, brother. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Have a good one.